I stood in the doorway of my workshop that morning and felt my heart stop. My wedding dress hung in shreds on the mannequin, soaked in dark red wine that dripped onto the wooden floor below. Months of work destroyed in a single night. The delicate lace I had stitched by candlelight lay torn and stained beyond repair. Pearl beads I had sewn one by one scattered across the floor like broken tears. My sister Ria stood in the corner near the window, still holding an empty wine bottle in her trembling hands. Her eyes were red and glassy, but there was something cold behind them. Something that looked almost satisfied. Outside, I could hear guests arriving early, their laughter drifting through the morning air. My wedding was supposed to start in 3 hours. I looked at Ria, searching for an explanation, for anything that made sense. She met my gaze and her lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "It slipped," she said, her voice flat and distant. But we both knew the truth. This wasn't an accident. I knelt down slowly, picking up a piece of torn lace that had taken me weeks to create. My hands shook as I held it. The fabric felt cold and wet between my fingers. I couldn't breathe properly. Everything I had worked for, every late night, every careful stitch had been destroyed by the person I trusted most. The room seemed to spin around me as reality settled in. My best friend Kira would arrive soon, expecting to help me dress. Tomas would be waiting at the chapel, nervous and excited. 200 guests were gathering to celebrate what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. But my dress was ruined. My sister had ruined it. I looked up at Ria again, trying to find the girl I grew up with, the sister who used to braid my hair and tell me stories. She was gone. The woman standing before me was someone else entirely. Someone bitter and broken. The screen in my mind faded to black as shock took over. Then slowly, I heard my own voice echo as if from far away. "My name is Leona. I make dresses for women who believe love still deserves beauty." But on that morning, I wondered if beauty meant anything at all. Before that terrible morning, my life had been simple and good. I ran a small bridal workshop in the countryside, in the same cottage where my mother had once taught me to sew. The walls were covered with sketches and fabric samples. Sunlight streamed through the wide windows, making the threads shimmer like tiny rainbows. I specialized in mending and altering wedding gowns for brides who couldn't afford new ones. Some paid me with fresh vegetables from their gardens. Others brought homemade bread or jars of honey. I never turned anyone away. My mother used to say that kind stitches never come undone, and I lived by those words. Children from the village would press their faces against my window, watching me work by candlelight when the evenings grew long. I would wave at them and sometimes let them touch the soft fabrics. The work filled my days with purpose and my heart with quiet joy. I wasn't wealthy or famous, but I was content. My workshop felt sacred, a place where broken things became whole again. Where dreams were repaired stitch by careful stitch. Everything changed when Ria came home. She arrived on a gray Tuesday afternoon, dragging a battered suitcase behind her and wearing sunglasses even though it was cloudy. I hadn't seen her in 2 years. She had moved to the city right after winning the regional beauty pageant, convinced she would become a model or actress. For a while, it seemed like she might. She sent photos of herself at fancy parties, wearing expensive clothes, always smiling that dazzling smile. Then the photos stopped coming. The calls became less frequent. When she finally appeared at my door, she looked tired and thin. Her designer clothes hung loose on her frame. She tried to smile like everything was fine, but her eyes told a different story. "I just needed a break from the city," she said, pushing past me into the cottage. "You don't mind if I stay a while, right?" I wanted to believe her. I wanted to think my sister had simply missed home and family. But when villagers stopped by to congratulate me on my upcoming wedding, I saw something flicker across Ria's face. Something dark and resentful. The small cruelties started almost immediately. Ria would make comments that seemed innocent but stung like needles. "Such a simple wedding," she would say, looking at my plans. I always imagined something grander for myself. When I showed her the dress I was making, she touched the fabric and wrinkled her nose slightly. Handmade. How rustic. She spilled coffee near my best fabric one morning, apologized without meaning it, and walked away. She forgot appointments I had scheduled with brides, leaving confused women standing at my door. During fittings, she would interrupt with loud phone conversations, disrupting the peaceful atmosphere I had worked to create. I tried to ignore it. I told myself she was hurting and needed time to heal from whatever had happened in the city. But Tomas, my fiancé, saw through her act. "She's not happy, Aaliyah," he said gently one evening after Ria had made another cutting remark. "Be careful." I brushed off his concern. Ria was my sister. We had shared a bedroom as children, told each other secrets in the dark. Surely her bitterness would fade once she settled in. Around that same time, an elderly man began visiting my workshop. He was thin and quiet, with silver hair and hands that moved with surprising grace. He would bring small items for repair, a torn sleeve, a loose button, nothing major. But he always stayed to watch me work. He never said much, just observed with thoughtful eyes that seemed to see more than they should. One afternoon, after I had spent an hour carefully mending a bride's veil that had been torn in 3 places, he spoke. "You mend more than cloth," he said softly. His voice had a weight to it, like he was sharing an important truth. I looked up, surprised. "I just try to help people," I replied, feeling slightly embarrassed. He smiled, a knowing expression that made me wonder who he really was. "Kind hands build their own miracles," he said before leaving. I didn't think much about it then. He seemed like just another kind villager, someone who appreciated good work. But his presence lingered in my mind, his words echoing during long hours at my sewing table. There was something about him that felt significant, though I couldn't explain why. As my wedding date approached, I began working on my own dress. I used fabric my mother had saved for years, delicate ivory lace with tiny flowers woven into the pattern. Each piece was precious, irreplaceable. I worked late into the nights, my fingers moving carefully across the material. Every stitch felt like a conversation with my mother, who had passed away 3 years earlier. I could almost hear her voice guiding me, teaching me as she had when I was young. The dress took shape slowly, beautifully. It wasn't fancy or expensive, but it was filled with love and memory. Ria would sometimes stand in the doorway watching me work. "It's lovely," she would say, but her tone was hollow. One night, I found her in the workshop after I had gone to bed. She was holding my sketchbook, flipping through pages of designs I had drawn over the years. "Just looking," she said quickly when I appeared. But her expression was dark, almost hungry. I took the sketchbook gently from her hands. "Please ask before touching my things," I said as kindly as I could. She nodded but didn't apologize. The night before my wedding, I couldn't sleep. Excitement and nerves kept me awake, so I went downstairs to check on the dress one final time. It hung on the mannequin near the window, illuminated by moonlight streaming through the glass. The lace seemed to glow softly, each pearl bead catching tiny fragments of light. I touched it gently, feeling the smoothness of the fabric beneath my fingertips. This dress represented everything I believed in: love, patience, the beauty of creating something with your own hands. I whispered a small prayer of gratitude before heading back upstairs. But I didn't know that Ria was awake too. I didn't know she had been drinking wine alone in her room, staring at the ceiling and thinking dark thoughts. I didn't know that after I went to bed, she walked downstairs in the darkness. I didn't know she stood before my dress for a long time, her hands trembling with jealousy and rage. And I didn't know that when she finally touched the delicate lace, it wasn't with admiration but with the intent to destroy. Morning came with birdsong and golden sunlight. I woke feeling lighter than I had in weeks. Today was my wedding day. I dressed quickly and rushed downstairs to the workshop, eager to begin preparing. That's when I saw it. My beautiful dress destroyed beyond recognition. Wine dripped from the torn fabric onto the floor. The pearl beads I had sewn so carefully were scattered everywhere. Rhea stood there with the empty bottle, looking both defiant and empty. For a moment, I couldn't speak. My throat closed up and my vision blurred with tears. Kira arrived shortly after and gasped when she saw the destruction. "We need to cancel," she said immediately, pulling out her phone. "We'll tell everyone there's been an emergency." But I shook my head. Tomas was waiting. Our guests were gathering. This was supposed to be our day, and I wouldn't let Rhea's cruelty steal it completely. "No," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I'll find another way." Kira looked at me like I had lost my mind, but I had already remembered something important. Something my mother had left behind. In the corner of the workshop stood an old wooden chest I had never opened. My mother had sealed it before she died, leaving instructions that I should only open it when the time was right. I had assumed she meant for my wedding day, but I had planned to open it after the ceremony. Now seemed like the right moment. I knelt before the chest and lifted the heavy lid. Inside lay folded ivory fabric, yellowed slightly with age but still beautiful. Beneath it was a letter in my mother's handwriting. My hands shook as I unfolded the paper. "My dearest Leona," it read. "If you're reading this, then love has been tested. Remember that what matters isn't perfection but perseverance. This fabric was woven by my grandmother and saved for a moment of great need. Use it to mend what's broken. Use it to show that true beauty survives any storm. I love you always, Mama." Tears streamed down my face as I held the precious fabric. Kira read the letter over my shoulder and squeezed my hand. "You can do this," she whispered. I looked at the clock. 3 hours until the ceremony. It seemed impossible, but I had to try. I locked myself in the workshop and lit every candle I could find. The room filled with warm, flickering light as I spread the fabric across my work table. My hands moved quickly, guided by years of practice and my mother's teachings. I cut and pinned, stitched and adjusted. Every movement was deliberate, fueled by memory and determination. This wasn't just about making a dress anymore. It was about honoring my mother's love and refusing to let bitterness win. Outside, I could hear Rhea moving around. At one point, she stood outside the locked door, listening. I didn't speak to her. I couldn't afford the distraction. Kira brought me water and words of encouragement, but mostly she let me work in focused silence. The hours passed in a blur of needle and thread. My fingers ached and my back protested, but I didn't stop. As dawn light began mixing with candlelight, the dress started taking shape. It wasn't the dress I had planned, but it was becoming something even more meaningful. Something born from loss and transformed into hope. By the time the church bells began ringing, signaling the start of the ceremony, I had finished. The dress hung before me, simple yet breathtaking. The antique fabric had a richness that new material could never match. The stitching was visible, honest, showing the work that had gone into its creation. I slipped it on with Kira's help, and when I looked in the mirror, I barely recognized myself. The dress fit perfectly, hugging my frame before flowing gently to the floor. Kira had woven wildflowers into my hair, and I wore my mother's pearl necklace. "You look like a dream," Kira whispered, tears in her eyes. At the church, whispers had begun spreading that the wedding might be cancelled. Some guests were preparing to leave. Then the doors opened, and I stepped inside. Sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows, casting colored patterns across the aisle. Every head turned toward me. The whispers died instantly. Tomas stood at the altar, his eyes widening as he saw me. His expression of pure awe made everything worth it. I walked forward slowly, feeling the weight of every step, every choice that had led to this moment. As I passed the pews, I saw Rhea sitting near the back. Her face had gone completely pale. Her eyes were fixed on my dress, on the way it caught the light, on the obvious love and skill that had gone into its creation. Tears began streaming down her face, but they weren't tears of joy or remorse. They were tears of realization. She had tried to destroy me and failed. She had tried to ruin my happiness, and instead, I had created something even more beautiful from the ashes of her cruelty. Her shoulders shook as she cried, but I didn't look at her again. I kept my eyes forward, focused on Tomas, on the life we were about to begin together. The ceremony was beautiful and simple. When Tomas lifted my veil, he whispered, "You're the strongest person I know." We exchanged vows and rings, and when the priest pronounced us married, the church erupted in applause. As we walked back down the aisle together, I finally glanced at Ria. She had her face buried in her hands, weeping openly. People around her looked uncomfortable, unsure whether to comfort her or look away. The reception was held in the village square, with long tables covered in wildflowers and simple food prepared by neighbors. Everyone wanted to know about my dress, about how I had managed to look so beautiful despite the rumors that had started spreading about some kind of disaster. I kept the details vague, not wanting to publicly shame Ria. "Sometimes plans change," I said with a smile. "But love adapts." Tomas kept his arm around me all evening, protective and proud. But Ria didn't stay for the reception. She had slipped away from the church immediately after the ceremony, and when I returned home late that night, I found her room empty. Not just empty, stripped bare. She had packed everything and left without a word. On her bed was a crumpled piece of paper. I unfolded it to find just 3 words in her shaky handwriting. "I'm sorry, Leona." But somehow, the apology felt incomplete. Hollow. Like she was sorry she had failed to break me, not sorry for trying. Over the following days, I tried calling her, but she never answered. Villagers asked where she had gone, and I could only shrug. She needed to find her own path, I would say. Life slowly returned to normal, though the events of my wedding day lingered like a strange dream. Tomas and I settled into married life, and I returned to my workshop, grateful for the familiar rhythm of needle and thread. But I noticed something odd. The elderly man who used to visit regularly had disappeared. I asked around the village, but nobody seemed to know much about him. He was always a quiet one, the baker said. Kept to himself mostly. One morning, I found something on my work table. A spool of golden thread I had never seen before, and beneath it, a small folded note. My hands trembled as I opened it. The handwriting was elegant and precise. "Beauty deserves to be seen. Your work has not gone unnoticed. Keep creating, and doors will open. With deepest respect." There was no signature, just initials at the bottom that I didn't recognize. I held the golden thread up to the light, watching it shimmer. Who was this mysterious man, and why had he been watching my work so carefully? The questions haunted me, but I had no answers. Only a growing sense that something significant was about to happen. 2 weeks after the wedding, strange things started happening. Brides who had never heard of me began showing up at my workshop, saying they had been told I did exceptional work. Orders increased until I could barely keep up. I hired 2 village girls to help with basic tasks. But with success came complications. Ria, it turned out, hadn't disappeared quietly. She had started spreading rumors from wherever she was hiding. Anonymous posts appeared online claiming that my wedding dress hadn't been my own work, that I had stolen designs, that I was a fraud taking advantage of desperate brides. The accusations hurt, especially because they came from my own sister. Some people believed the rumors. I lost a few customers who demanded proof of my skills. But then something unexpected happened. A bride I had helped years ago, a woman named Teresa who I had refused payment from because she couldn't afford it, came forward. She brought a thank you letter I had written her, covered in small sketches and design notes. "This is the real Leona," she told everyone who would listen. Other brides began sharing their stories too, letters I had written, photos of the work I had done for them. The truth spread faster than the lies. But the damage had been done. The village became divided. Some people believed Ria's accusations, thinking there must be some truth to them. Others defended me fiercely, pointing to years of honest work and kindness. Arguments broke out at the market. Former friends stopped speaking to each other. The peaceful community I loved became tense and fractured. Tomas remained steady through it all, encouraging me to ignore the gossip. "Let your work speak for itself," he would say. But it was hard to focus when everywhere I went, I felt people watching, judging, whispering. One particularly difficult afternoon, a group of women confronted me outside my workshop. "If you're innocent, why won't you address the accusations directly?" one demanded. I looked at their angry faces and felt exhausted. "Because the truth doesn't need defending," I said quietly. "Time will reveal everything." That night, I cried in Tomas's arms, wondering if I should close the workshop and start over somewhere new. But morning brought an unexpected delivery. An elegant envelope sealed with gold wax. Inside was an invitation written in beautiful calligraphy. "The House of Oraline requests your presence. Your work has reached our eyes." The House of Oraline was legendary in the fashion world, a prestigious bridal design house in the city known for discovering exceptional talent. I had heard of them but never imagined they would notice someone like me. The invitation included train tickets and a hotel reservation. "They want to meet you this weekend," Tomas said, reading over my shoulder. "You have to go." I was terrified. I had never been to the big city. I didn't know how to navigate those sophisticated circles. But Kira insisted on coming with me for moral support, and together we boarded the train that Friday morning. The city overwhelmed me immediately. Tall buildings blocked out the sky. Cars and people rushed everywhere. The noise was constant and disorienting. The House of Oraline occupied an elegant building with tall windows and stone columns. Inside, the atelier was breathtaking. Dozens of wedding dresses hung on display, each more beautiful than the last. Designers moved through the space with purpose and grace. A receptionist led us to a private showroom, and that's when I saw it. My wedding dress, the one I had created in a single night from my mother's fabric, displayed on a mannequin in the center of the room. I stopped breathing for a moment, staring at my dress in this grand setting. It looked even more beautiful here, lit perfectly, positioned with care. "How did you get this?" I whispered. Footsteps echoed behind me, and I turned to see the elderly man from my village. But he looked different here, dressed in an elegant suit, his silver hair styled perfectly. He was no longer the humble customer with small repairs. He moved with authority and confidence. "Leona," he said warmly, extending his hand. "I'm Vincent Marchand, founder of the House of Oraline." My mind spun trying to make sense of this. "You're the old man who came to my workshop," I said stupidly. He smiled. I was indeed. Though perhaps not as old and helpless as I appeared. "Your mother, Helena, was my first apprentice many years ago. She taught me that true artistry comes from the heart, not from fancy training or expensive materials. When she passed, I promised myself I would watch over you from a distance." Tears filled my eyes as I absorbed this information. "You knew my mother?" "She was one of the finest seamstresses I ever met," Vincent said gently. "And you have inherited her gift completely." Vincent led me through the atelier, explaining how he had been following my work for years. "I would visit your village regularly, commission small repairs, observe your technique and your character," he said. "I watched you help brides who couldn't pay. I saw your patience and generosity. But it was your wedding dress that confirmed what I suspected. You don't just create beautiful things, Leona. You create meaningful things." He gestured to several other designers gathered in the room. "These are my senior team. They've all studied your dress and agree that it deserves to be featured in our upcoming exhibition. We call it Threads of the Heart, and it showcases designers who create from authentic emotion rather than just following trends." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My simple workshop, my small village life, my handmade dress, all of it was being recognized by one of the most respected names in bridal fashion. "We'd like to feature your dress as the centerpiece," Vincent continued. "And we'd like to discuss offering you a position here, creating a line of gowns under your mother's name. The Helena Collection." I looked at Kira, who was grinning through happy tears. This was beyond anything I had imagined. The exhibition opened a month later with tremendous publicity. Fashion magazines sent photographers. Influential designers attended the opening night. And at the center of it all hung my dress, with a plaque explaining the story behind it. How it had been created in a single night from antique fabric. How it represented love's ability to transform loss into beauty. The media attention was overwhelming. Reporters contacted me for interviews. Fashion bloggers wrote articles analyzing my technique. The exhibition attracted thousands of visitors over the following weeks. Back in my village, everything changed. The rumors Ria had spread evaporated in the face of such public recognition. People who had doubted me now apologized. The division in the community healed as everyone took pride in having such a talented dressmaker among them. Orders flooded in from across the country. Brides wanted the Leona experience, the personal touch, the meaningful craftsmanship. I had to hire more assistants and expand my workshop. But through it all, I tried to stay grounded, remembering my mother's words about kind stitches. Success was wonderful, but it wasn't the point. The point was still helping people feel beautiful on their most important day. Then, 3 months after the exhibition opened, disaster struck for Ria. She had been living in a distant city, working odd jobs and apparently spending her time online, still spreading negativity about me. But one night, she made a fatal mistake. Drunk and bitter, she recorded a video confession. In it, she admitted to destroying my wedding dress on purpose. She described exactly how she had done it, laughing about how she thought she had ruined my wedding. She claimed she deserved to be the successful one, not me. She must have intended to keep the video private, perhaps just wanting to vent her feelings. But somehow, it was accidentally posted to her public social media account. By morning, it had been shared thousands of times. The response was immediate and brutal. People who had believed her accusations now turned on her with fury. Angry comments flooded her accounts. Her current employer saw the video and fired her. Former friends abandoned her. The video even made it to news outlets, held up as an example of toxic jealousy. I first learned about it when Kira called me, her voice urgent. "Leona, you need to see this. Ria posted something terrible." I watched the video once, feeling sick to my stomach. Despite everything Ria had done, I didn't feel satisfaction watching her public humiliation. I felt sad. Sad for the sister I had lost, sad for the bitterness that had consumed her, sad for the life she could have lived if she had made different choices. That evening, Tomas found me sitting in the workshop, staring at nothing. "You're thinking about her," he said gently. I nodded. "She's my sister. No matter what she did, she's still my sister." A week later, on a rainy afternoon, I was teaching a small group of village girls basic sewing techniques. The House of Oraline had provided funding for me to start a free training program for young women who wanted to learn the craft. I had named it the Helena Foundation, after my mother. The girls were focused on their work when the workshop door creaked open. Everyone looked up. Ria stood in the doorway, soaked from the rain, carrying a small bag. She looked thinner than before, her clothes worn and cheap. Her hair hung limp around her face. But it was her eyes that struck me. They were different now, empty of the defiance and anger that had poisoned her before. She looked broken and small. Nobody moved for a long moment. The girls glanced between Ria and me, waiting to see what would happen. Ria's voice came out barely above a whisper. "I know I don't deserve to be here. I know what I did was unforgivable." Her hands trembled as she clutched her bag. I destroyed your dress because I couldn't stand seeing you happy when I was so miserable. I tried to ruin your reputation because I wanted someone else to hurt the way I was hurting. I was wrong about everything. Tears streamed down her face, but she didn't look away from me. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. Really, truly sorry. And I understand if you want me to leave and never come back. The workshop was silent except for the rain drumming on the roof. Every instinct told me to be angry, to make her feel the pain she had caused me. But when I looked at my sister, standing there completely defeated, I heard my mother's voice in my head. Kind stitches never come undone. I stood up slowly and walked toward her. Rhea flinched slightly, as if expecting me to strike her. Instead, I gently took her wet bag and set it aside. Then I pulled out a chair at one of the sewing tables. Sit, I said softly. We start with mending. That was 2 years ago. Today, Rhea works beside me in the expanded workshop. She started as my assistant, doing simple tasks, learning the craft from the beginning. She was patient and humble, never complaining, always trying to prove through actions that she had changed. Slowly, she earned back not just my trust but the trust of the whole village. She teaches the beginners class now, showing young girls how to thread needles and make straight stitches. Sometimes I catch her smiling at her students with genuine warmth, and I see glimpses of the sister I remember from childhood. The Helena collection has become internationally known. Brides travel from around the world to commission dresses from our workshop. But we never forget where we started, in a small cottage with more love than money, learning that beauty isn't about perfection. It's about perseverance. Last month, the House of Oraline hosted a special exhibition finale. Vincent asked me to create something that represented my journey. I worked with Rhea to design a quilt made from scraps of my destroyed wedding dress, pieces of the dress I created to replace it, and fabric from dozens of gowns we had made for brides over the past 2 years. We called it Forgiven. At the exhibition, I stood before the crowd with Rhea beside me. Love doesn't fade when it's torn, I said, my voice steady and clear. It transforms into something new. Something that includes both the breaking and the mending. That's what makes it real. Rhea watched from just behind me, crying quietly. Not from shame or jealousy this time, but from gratitude. Later, as we packed up to return home, Vincent pulled me aside. Your mother would be so proud of you, he said. Not just for your talent, but for your heart. I thought about those words as Rhea and I drove back to our village. The cottage came into view, its windows glowing warm in the twilight. Through the glass, I could see the sewing machines and fabric, the life we had built from broken pieces. Inside, Tomas was waiting with dinner. The village girls would arrive tomorrow for their weekly lesson. Orders waited to be filled, dresses to be created, beauty to be crafted from simple materials and patient hands. Rhea touched my arm as we got out of the car. Thank you, she said simply, for giving me another chance. I looked at my sister, remembering the morning she destroyed my dress, remembering the years of healing that followed, remembering my mother's wisdom about kind stitches. That's what family does, I replied. We mend what's broken. That night, I sat in my workshop alone for a while, running my fingers over the fabrics and threads. I thought about everything that had happened, every moment of pain and triumph. And I realized that my wedding dress being destroyed was never really about the dress at all. It was about discovering what remained when everything beautiful was torn away. It was about learning that true beauty isn't something that can be destroyed by cruelty or jealousy. True beauty lives in how we respond to being broken. In whether we choose bitterness or grace. In whether we hoard our gifts or share them generously. The dress I wore on my wedding day is hanging in a museum now, admired by thousands. But the dress I treasure most is the one that never existed, the one Rhea destroyed, because without that loss, I would never have discovered what I was truly capable of creating. I would never have learned that the most beautiful things are born from the hardest moments. As I turned off the lights and headed upstairs to bed, I whispered the words that had become my truth. She tried to ruin my wedding dress, but all she did was reveal what love was really made of. And in the darkness, I could almost hear my mother's voice agreeing, proud and warm, reminding me that kind stitches never come undone. They just keep spreading, mending more and more of the world, one careful stitch at a time.